This video was brought to you by Squarespace.
Diku. This may not seem like a big deal to most people. In fact, I'd say that this news story came and went without much hubbub. And it seems that one big reason is because it's kind of a predictable story. It involves Nintendo acting in a way that anyone would probably expect. Business as usual, you know? But me? I'm not able to let this one slip so easily. To me, this is kind of a thing. My job is talking about video games. Ultimately, the stakes are pretty low here. The gaming industry is really important. The medium is an important art form. Games mean a lot to people. But I do try to remind myself that at the end of the day, none of this should affect me too much, you know? There's rarely a reason to get too upset about anything. But I'm not gonna lie. This one got to me. This is one of those stories that genuinely makes me a little bit mad. It's true. It's true. Look at me. Look at my face. I'm a tiny bit mad. I'm not gonna go on a huge tirade and start a petition and all that stuff, but at the very least, I need to talk about it here because, well, this is my outlet. This is therapy for me. This is how I process my feelings. For a brief recap, a few years ago, some rumors started going around about Samus showing up in Fortnite, especially after Sony gave Epic the rights to create a Kratos skin and Microsoft lent the Master Chief. All eyes were on Nintendo to follow suit. Characters from all over the gaming sphere and beyond were being added to the game. It was turning into a humongous collaboration between all entertainment mediums, a veritable everyone's here of pop culture itself. So if everyone was playing nice, would Nintendo follow suit? And if they did, who would they add? Well, it seemed that the obvious answer was Samus. Metroid is one of Nintendo's oldest and most recognizable series, and perhaps more importantly, Samus already shoots guns, in a sense. Thematically, Samus in Fortnite would be more fitting than, say, Mario or Link or Pikachu, as much as I would like to see all of them shooting guns. So everyone sat back and waited for Nintendo to get in on the fun. And the announcement simply never came. Then in 2021, during the massive court case between Epic Games and Apple, some documents came to light which included fan art of Samus, suggesting that her inclusion was discussed internally at Epic. It's possible that this was simply a case of wishful thinking on the part of some Nintendo-loving employees, or maybe there was a real conversation, maybe even with Nintendo themselves. It did make sense that someone at Epic would try to get a Nintendo character in Fortnite, but whatever the case, nothing came of it. The years passed and it seemed that Samus in Fortnite was just not gonna happen. Well, recently, Donald Mustard, Chief Creative Officer at Epic Games, left the company. And in an interview with GameFile, he finally revealed why Samus never made it to Fortnite. Apparently, Epic did indeed talk with Nintendo about the idea, but Nintendo didn't want to do it unless the Samus skin was exclusive to the Switch. Well, you see, Fortnite doesn't do exclusive skins, and as far as I know, no one else has demanded exclusivity. Not Sony with Kratos, not Microsoft with Master Chief. So Epic simply said, sorry, I guess this isn't gonna work. Now, again, this is par for the course for Nintendo. They are fiercely protective of their IPs, and they want to keep those IPs on their own systems in order to incentivize people to purchase those systems. Even the idea of bringing Mario and company to smartphones was something that Nintendo had to warm up to over several years. Nintendo properties belong on Nintendo platforms, period. And we've seen this kind of console exclusivity before. The Samus car in Rocket League is exclusive to the Switch, and even way back in 2002, the only way to play as Link in Soul Calibur 2 was to play the game on GameCube. There is absolutely a precedent here. According to Nintendo's own philosophies, a Samus skin in Fortnite would have to be a Switch exclusive. Hold it! Real quick, I just want to remind everyone that this video was brought to you by Squarespace. When building my website, Arlo recommends I went in with zero prior website building know-how, yet Squarespace made the whole process quick and easy. I can build, update, and create content for my website intuitively. Formatting, embedding, everything is simple. I can even save time by scheduling my posts and having them automatically pushed to social media. If I ever need more advanced features, Squarespace offers a host of powerful extensions, and when I want to see how my site is doing, I can always dip into the super convenient analytics feature. To try out Squarespace for yourself, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. Then when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/Arlo to save 10% off your first website or domain. And now for today's recommendation, Panama Fleets. I found this band on a list of artists similar to Boards of Canada, and they are my current musical obsession. They got a whole bunch of albums on YouTube, and it's all really, really good stuff. Like, really few views, too. More people need to know about Panama Fleets. Thanks again to Squarespace. Now back to the video. Okay, so this is gonna sound like an aside, but I promise it's relevant. In fact, you might laugh at how unnecessarily deep I go with this whole thing, but this is just how I work. This is me being me. Over the last few years, I have been realizing a lot of stuff about myself. And one huge thing, really huge thing, has been realizing how much my own anxiety has kept me from many great things. This is something I absolutely see in other people as well. All too often, we make snap decisions. We tell ourselves that things have to go a certain way, and that's final. No exceptions. Sometimes this means that a great opportunity might come along, but you have this preconceived notion that stops you from actually considering the opportunity. You don't even realize you're doing it. It just comes automatically. You say, no, I can't do this thing. It is simply not possible because of all of these reasons I've already drilled into my brain. Looking back on my life, I keep seeing these branching paths where I took what I felt was the safer, more logical route, but I see now that I was actually letting my fear prevent me from truly growing, from accomplishing big new things that were a little too scary. I would automatically assume the worst outcome. I would rationalize why something wouldn't work before actually giving it a good hard think. I would focus so hard on the downsides, or even potential downsides, that I was completely blind to the fact that the upsides were tenfold. The potential good dramatically outweighed the potential bad. Nintendo is an old company run by old, very economically conservative businessmen. It's taken them a very long time to break free from some of the nonsense logic bringing their company down. In some areas, they have been successful in this regard, and in other areas, they still struggle. And knowing that they turned down the opportunity to put Samus in Fortnite simply because Samus couldn't be a Switch exclusive is exceedingly frustrating. No doubt I've realized through the course of writing this script because I see myself in this decision. I understand it all too well, and it bugs me. Now, let it be known that I have no love for Fortnite, and I very much have no love for Epic Games. They are yet another company that manipulates kids into emptying their piggy banks, abuses their employees, etc., etc. I personally do not care to see Samus in Fortnite, or any Nintendo character for that matter, because you won't catch me touching the game with a 10-foot pole. I won't fault you for playing it, we all make our own decisions, but just know that I have no real stake in this on the Fortnite end of things. But I'm willing to set aside my feelings about the company and look at this purely from a business standpoint. And also, I will admit, simply from the standpoint of a Metroid fan. Nintendo, despite all their experience, despite all their collective business acumen, have made such a dramatically poor decision here. With any decision, you've got to weigh the pros and the cons. And I truly believe that in this case, Nintendo was so blinded by their, for lack of a better word, anxiety, their fear of change, fear of loosening their iron-fisted grip on their IPs, that they have completely failed to see that the benefits of letting Samus be in Fortnite vastly outweigh the downsides by a factor I can't even begin to calculate. Need I remind you, Fortnite is one of the biggest games in the world, even several years after its launch, and ranks among the most ludicrously successful games ever. The game has become something of a platform in itself, and it's still only growing. It's got a stranglehold on this generation of kids. My poor little nephew frequently laments that he just wants someone to talk to about the dozens and dozens of Switch games he loves, but everyone at his school just wants to talk about Fortnite all the time. If it ain't Fortnite, maybe Minecraft, or doodling Among Us with butts, which seems to be a big thing according to him, they just don't care. Every single day, Fortnite is played by millions upon millions upon millions of kids, and adults too, of course. It's basically as popular as you can ever expect a video game to be. I don't know if it's possible to get an audience much bigger than this. Metroid, on the other hand, our dear Metroid is a drop in the bucket compared to Fortnite. Lots of people know who Samus is, but historically, very few people tend to buy her games. For whatever baffling reason I cannot comprehend, the series has never done well in Japan, and even in the West, the numbers tend to be disappointing. Granted, it's not like Metroid has had a lot of opportunities to sell in recent years, but even Dread, which was highly acclaimed, exists in a time when Metroidvanias are more popular than ever, landed on a system with a humongous install base, and has the honor of being the best-selling Metroid ever, didn't really sell that well at the end of the day. About 3 million is good for Metroid, but it's a modest success in the grand scheme of things. I don't quite know why the series struggles as it does. I guess I kind of feel like there are all these hurdles Nintendo keeps getting caught up on. Releasing great games on unsuccessful systems, releasing questionable games on successful systems, or releasing a great game on a successful system, but at a price point that many probably feel doesn't quite fit the game's length. That's my theory about Dread, anyway. There are a lot of Metroidvanias to choose from, and most of them are a lot cheaper than this. Whatever the case, though, I believe that out of all of Nintendo's many struggling IPs, Metroid has the biggest potential. The gameplay and world are appealing, it's more mature than their other legacy IPs, but doesn't isolate the younger audience. It's got loads of storytelling potential. I just know that Metroid, if handled correctly, could be so much. And one thing any struggling series needs is exposure. Sure, you and I might be intimately acquainted with Samus, but the greater gaming population is not. A passing, vague familiarity is the best you'll get with a lot of people. When you want to grow a property, one of the best things you can do is get eyes on it. Get people looking at it. Get people curious what it's about. Just look at how much Smash Bros. Helped get people talking about Fire Emblem and the Mother series. If Samus had a skin in Fortnite, we're talking tens of millions of eyes on the character. And not just eyes, either. This would be a chance for people to actually play as her. Sure, they'd have to pay, so it might not feel quite as organic as simply choosing the character in Smash Bros. But if the skin is cool enough, then I'm sure there will be plenty of curious newcomers trying her out, and even just seeing her in the game, even just the pre-existing Metroid fans using her would be such a good thing for the series. Oh, and the initial announcement and release would drum up a ton of interest in Metroid all at once. Donald Mustard himself said that working with Nintendo would be their biggest collab yet. Samus wouldn't be the most popular character they'd ever introduced into the game, but working with Nintendo would feel like that big of a deal to the people who run Fortnite. Even humble little Samus would feel like that big of a win. Samus hitting Fortnite would be an event. And hey, who knows, maybe when all was said and done, this wouldn't actually translate to a considerable uptick in people buying and playing Metroid games. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here, but I'm of the opinion that it would at least be worth trying. Impressing the Metroid series upon that many people is without a doubt something worth trying. And even beyond Metroid, Nintendo itself could always use the publicity. This wouldn't just be a good look for Samus, but for all of Nintendo. They're doing just fine right now, but more is always better. And they might be reaching more kids now than in previous years, but like I said, schoolyard talk is still dominated by the competition. Get all those Fortnite playing folks looking at Nintendo characters and maybe even talking about Nintendo. It's literally just free advertising. All of this could have happened easily. Samus could be in Fortnite right now, and maybe this really would lead to a huge boon for the series. But Nintendo said no. They said no because they couldn't have things exactly their way. They are so fixated on this perfect world they've dreamed up for themselves that the idea of relaxing their control over their IPs just slightly, ever so slightly, is simply out of the question. They're that scared of the idea of letting a person play as one of their characters on a box that doesn't have their logo on it. They feel that all the publicity and what it could potentially do for their beloved series that has struggled for nearly 40 years would simply not be worth the downsides. But what are the downsides, really? Tangibly, practically speaking, what is the worst case scenario if Nintendo lets people play as Samus on their PlayStations? Let's really look at it. Well, in this scenario, the downside would be Nintendo could no longer say that their characters have to stay on their platforms. Their perfect track record would be broken. They would have to admit that sometimes, in some situations, exceptions can be made. That's it. That's the worst outcome. They didn't let Epic put Samus in Fortnite because they decided they simply can't. That would break the rule that they made, the rule that should serve them, not the other way around. Their decision was made entirely on the basis of upholding an outdated, ridiculous rule that all along should have been more of, in the words of Captain Barbossa, a guideline. Hey Nintendo, put Samus in Fortnite. No! Why not? Because we can't. Why can't you? Because we can't. But why not? Because it's not a thing we do. But really, why not? Because that would break the rule. And why does that rule matter? Because the idea of a Nintendo character being played on another box makes us feel icky. Why? Because it's just icky. It's just wrong. But what about your mobile games? That's different. Why? Because those are our games, so we control them. You could completely control how they depict Samus in Fortnite, but then people would be playing our character in a game that's not ours. And how would that be bad? It just would! Okay, but like actually, what harm would that do? How would that negatively impact your business? It would make people, buy more of those other games in boxes instead of ours. It absolutely wouldn't. If anything, it would push them toward your games in boxes. Yes, it would. It would be bad. But if you logically look at what it could do No logic, only rules. Rules keep us safe. And then Furukawa knocks the lunch out of your hand and runs away. I get it. Nintendo likes their little ecosystem. They like the idea that if you want to play a Nintendo thing, you gotta buy a Nintendo box, or at least a Nintendo game on your phone. But an ecosystem shouldn't be closed tight. That doesn't allow room for it to grow. If you absolutely insist that the only way to experience Nintendo is under Nintendo's own terms, then you've got loads and loads of people who will just go on not experiencing Nintendo. I mean, they're happy to do it. You've got to actively reach for those people. You've got to break out of your comfort zone. Obligatory food analogy time. Probably been waiting for this. Let's say you sell burritos. Is it better to say, anyone who wants one of my burritos has to come and buy it from my restaurant, period? It doesn't matter how much you want to try one. If you don't come sit right here under this roof, you're out of luck. Because this restaurant, this one location being successful entirely on my terms is the only outcome I will accept. Or perhaps is it better to say, hey, maybe we should find ways to reach new people with these burritos. Let's get in the truck and bring them to a venue. Try to sell them to a whole new crowd. Let's open up delivery options so people from all over town can get in on them. Which sounds like the better strategy? which sounds like the healthier mindset. And that's what's crazy here. Nintendo wouldn't even have to get in the truck, so to speak. We're not even talking about crazier ideas like selling their games on PC or anything like that. This would be small beans. They would barely have to do any work. They would basically just say yes, let Epic do it, and sit back while their character rakes in the publicity. They would probably even get a cut of the sales of the skin. They would even make money. But nah. They don't want that. Free advertising and money? Not appealing in the slightest. To tie all this back to myself and my own realizations over the last few years, I've learned that doing new things, easing up on previously established rules, can be scary. You can't help but worry about the potential damage that could result, the ways that things could go wrong. But trust me, nothing is more damaging than missing out on a great opportunity because you couldn't find the courage to just try. Whether you're one person or a huge company, missing the chance to improve because you're too scared of something bad happening is just as bad, if not worse, as something bad actually happening. When you're all caught up in your own ruminations, trapped in circular reasoning, you're so focused on what could go wrong that you can't see what could go right. And constantly choosing the wrong path, avoiding growth because you're so scared of damage, is in its own way a source of constant damage. Damage to your life and livelihood that you might not even perceive.
And this has been your daily therapy session, courtesy of Arlo. For further discussion on recognizing and overcoming a myriad of mental illnesses, tune into my streams.